Sarah, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am excellent. I appreciate you making time to chat with me. It just occurred to me, I forgot to say that we are recording this on April 22nd. And the reason I mention that is because in the time of quarantine for COVID-19, the news moves at an unbelievable pace. So whatever happens between when we're recording this and when this airs, we can't possibly be expected to react to because we have no idea
Won't
what's
be held accountable.
So that being said, probably the best place to start is I don't summarize other people's books, and I try not to do their biographies because I'm terrible at both. So if you would please give esteemed audience kind of an overview of your background.
Wow. So up until very recently, I was a literary agent with Bradford Literary. And before that, I was an agent at Curtis Brown Literary and focusing mostly on young adult and middle grade and some adult, but not quite as much. And in January, I started my own freelance editing company. It's called Next Chapter Editorial. And I'm kind of focusing all across the board. So not just YA and middle grade, but I'm been doing a lot of adult, specifically sci-fi and women's fiction I'm doing a lot of right now. Just sort of how things have formed, but I'm still trying to focus on kidlit as much as possible and would love to get even more of it. But yeah, that's sort of what I've been up to. And I don't know what else I can say.
No, that's a start. I'm going to ask you to break down a couple of those roles for us because I want to know a little bit more about everything.
All right.
But real quick, for all those eager beavers that have already said sold, let me get in touch with Sarah LaPolla and get things rolling. What's the best way for esteemed audience to get in touch with you to seek out your editorial services?
So the best way would just be email me at sarah@nextchapteredits.com. And what I usually look for is just a quick synopsis, not a whole length synopsis, but like literally shorter than a query of like what your book is about and what type of services you're looking for. And we can go from there. I'm also on Reedsy, which is REEDSY. And you can search for me on there and just get in contact and book any services straight through that website as well.
Excellent. So, well, let's start with the beginning of your career. I was curious because you got a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing of Nonfiction.
Yeah.
And yeah, it seems like you haven't been doing a whole lot of editing of nonfiction. So when and why did you make that shift to fiction?
Why did I focus on fiction?
Yeah, and when did that shift for you?
I think I fell into young adult specifically just because of the time I started in publishing. I focused on nonfiction in both undergrad and for my MFA, and I always wrote personal essays and, like short memoir pieces. And I think if it had existed at the time, I would have, like, in another life been like, I'm now a BuzzFeed writer, like exclusively. Like that would have been my dream job if it existed when I was in college. And that's just sort of what I like to write because it came naturally to me, but it's not something I thought of selling. One, like personal essay collections just, don't sell that well. And when you're just starting out in publishing, you sort of need to make a name right away. And YA and paranormal was the hot thing. So that's sort of just what I fell into representing first. I will, like, now that I'm on the editing side, memoir is sort of treated the same way as fiction. So that's something that's in my wheelhouse editorially and certainly my background as a writer. But I just sort of slowly distance myself from it. But it's still what I love to read. It's still what I love to write when I do write. But it just like, it's sort of like a don't mix business with pleasure kind of thing for me of like, that's just like my writing life and just the like resume I've built up and my expertise has just developed into specifically young adult and kidlit, but fiction in general.
So is it work on fiction all day and then at night to unwind, it's time for nonfiction?
I like reading fiction as well. I haven't been reading as much nonfiction as I should. But what my usual go-tos is adult literary fiction, or just things that I can really get lost in a world, like speculative fiction, but then like personal essays. So like either hyper realistic or not realistic at all.
And when you were getting your MFA, were you thinking that you wanted to be working in publishing, or what was the goal?
Because of what I studied, I never really thought like I will be a writer, like as my full-time job, because personal essayists aren't really full-time writers, especially in like 2006, 2007. You have to already be kind of famous, and I was really young at the time. And when I was applying to MFA programs, I just wanted to move to New York, and like I knew I wanted to keep studying writing, but the more important thing for me was becoming a better editor. And so I can move to New York and work in publishing. And that's sort of like the goal I had in mind. So I just did it. And then I got into the new school, and I got to live in Greenwich Village my first 2 years of living in New York, and started interning, and it sort of like all kind of snowballed from there. But yeah, in my head, I was like, I'm going to get this MFA, but it's more to be an editor and less to be like a full-time writer. But I still love writing, and I still like doing it in my free time. And maybe that'll be a thing I do professionally one day, but editing is probably my focus for the foreseeable future.
And where were you moving to New York from?
Not far, upstate New York.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to be in the city.
So I know you started with Curtis Brown in 2008. You were an assistant to the Foreign Rights Department. Is that right?
Yeah. I started in foreign rights, and I was in foreign rights all 5-6 years I was at Curtis Brown, which was really fun. I like working in subrights. I think it's an area that all literary agents should be aware of, and having that firsthand knowledge was really important to me. Just learning another side of what being an agent is really important, I think, and what else you can do for writers and what else is out there for writers. So I really liked it as a start. And then a company like Curtis Brown is so large that I just didn't have time to focus on my domestic list that I was building. So that's the reason I ended up leaving foreign rights and leaving the agency. But it was still like a really great experience.
And so what, when you're moving from foreign rights to associate agent, forgive my shocking ignorance of the publishing industry, but how big of a change is that? And also, what kind of skills did you learn that you can be bringing to your editorial services now?
Well, when I was starting in publishing, it was right around the recession. So I got in just under the wire of all the hiring freezes, and publishing, it's sort of going through that a little bit right now again, but during the last recession, things just got a little bit harder, and projects needed to be a lot more polished in order to sell. And I think my class of agents, if you want to call us that, we all became very editorial. Like that was just how we learned how to be an agent. So we had to learn the selling part of it and how to negotiate and all of that. But the part that, our older mentors didn't really have to do as much was really edit the books. Or at least, get them submission ready. And then the editors edit them.
Did you ever take umbrage having edited a book so professionally and got it to exactly where you want it, and then some new editor comes in and says, no, we're going to do it my way?
No, because it's always working in conjunction. And I can't speak for other agents, but when knowing I'd be an editorial agent, one, there's always that knowledge that this part is not my job, but it's the part I'm doing. And there's a line between submission ready and publication ready. And there would be those conversations with my authors of this, there's this giant plot hole, or this character's underdeveloped, and these major things that I know an editor would be like, this project's not ready. Those are the parts that I would really work with my authors on and get it into shape. I would very rarely do line edits. very rarely start nitpicking. There'd be conversations where I'd be like, you know what, this is something we're going to let an editor just decide on their own of what to do, because this isn't a deal breaker. And that would usually be my main line of, is this going to be a deal breaker? Am I now just editing this book as an editor? And like, there's always that line of like, what is an editorial agent versus what is an editor? And it's letting the editors still have enough there to put their own vision into it and work with the author.
Gotcha. So you want to make sure that the editor can feel inspired and have those nice aha moments of,
yeah,
I'm excited to be editing this book.
Right, exactly. Because like, that's how I feel now as an editor of, there is still something here to work with. Like, I don't like these perfectly polished projects. You don't have anything to really roll up your sleeves and do. You want to make sure the writing is good enough and the story is strong enough. So like, this is a writer who will be able to revise well and someone I can work with. If it's not there at all, you're like, well, this just needs to be rewritten. There's not a whole lot of editing there. And if it's super polished, it's like, well, my job is done. There's potential to still grow with an author is like the sweet spot for like a really good editorial relationship, I think.